Give me the money right now, you useless old woman. That was the first thing my own daughter screamed at me that morning. Her voice echoed through the living room so loudly that even the windows rattled. I was sitting quietly in my armchair with a cup of tea in my hands when she stormed in like a hurricane. Before I could even stand up, she grabbed a thick hardcover book from the coffee table and threw it straight at my face. The corner of the book hit my cheek hard. My glasses fell to the floor. And behind her, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, her boyfriend started laughing. Not a polite laugh. Not an uncomfortable laugh. No. A cruel, mocking laugh that made my stomach twist. Come on, Linda, he chuckled, shaking his head. You told me she was stubborn, but wow, she really is a greedy old lady. I could barely breathe. For 72 years of my life, I had been called many things. Mother, teacher, neighbor, friend. But never in my life had my own child looked me in the eye and called me a useless old woman. Mom, stop pretending you don't have it. Linda shouted again, stepping closer. Her heels slammed against the wooden floor with every step. I know you have millions sitting in your accounts. Dad left you everything. I want my share now. Her boyfriend snorted behind her. Yeah, he added lazily, leaning against the wall like he owned the place. Stop acting poor. You're sitting on a gold mine. I stared at them both. My own daughter. The little girl I used to braid hair for before school. The girl whose nightmares I comforted when she was afraid of the dark. Now she stood in front of me like a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. Her eyes had no warmth in them at all. Just greed. Linda. My voice trembled. You're hurting me. Instead of softening, her face twisted in anger. Oh please, she scoffed. Don't start crying now. I'm not falling for your old lady drama. You've been hoarding money while I'm struggling. What kind of mother does that? Her boyfriend burst out laughing again. Wow, he said, clapping slowly. This is unbelievable. The woman sitting on millions and still playing the victim. My throat tightened. They didn't know the truth. Not really. They only knew rumors. After my husband passed away last year, people started whispering about his investments. About the property. About the money he left behind. But the truth was much more complicated than that. And Linda had never cared enough to ask. Instead, she had chosen to believe the worst. You want money? She snapped, pointing her finger inches from my face. Fine. Then listen carefully, old woman. If you don't transfer $2 million to my account today, I swear I'll make your life miserable. Her boyfriend nodded approvingly. Smart girl, he said. Sometimes you have to pressure people like her. The room spun around me. $2 million. My daughter was threatening me for money. I felt something warm slide down my cheek. Tears. Not loud sobs. Just quiet, painful tears that wouldn't stop. And that only made them laugh harder. Oh my God. Linda rolled her eyes. Look at her crying. Seriously? You're embarrassing yourself. She turned to her boyfriend and shook her head. See what I've been dealing with my whole life, she said. He grinned. Yeah, I can see why you're tired of her. For a moment, I said nothing. I just looked at them. Really looked at them. And something inside me finally broke. Because in that moment, I realized something terrible. My daughter didn't just disrespect me. She despised me. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that the book she had thrown at my face was actually the very thing that would destroy both of them. And before this story continues, dear listeners, if you're new here, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the end, because what happened next shocked even the police. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm a 72-year-old grandmother. And this is the story of how my own daughter tried to steal millions from me, and how I made sure she ended up in handcuffs instead. But to understand why she hated me so much, you first need to know what happened to our family 10 years ago. And trust me, that part of the story is even worse. When my daughter demanded $2 million and laughed while I cried, it didn't happen overnight. Hatred like that doesn't appear in a single moment. It grows slowly, like a crack in glass that spreads year after year, until one day the entire window shatters. And if you had met my daughter Linda when she was a child, you would never believe she could become the woman standing in my living room that morning. Because once upon a time, Linda was the sweetest little girl anyone had ever seen. She used to run through this very house with pigtails bouncing behind her, giggling so loudly the neighbors could hear. She loved drawing pictures of our family with bright crayons, and every picture looked the same. A big yellow sun, our house, her father, me, and her holding both our hands. Back then, she would hug me tightly every night before bed and whisper the same words. "I love you, Mommy." Those memories still live inside this house. Every wall, every hallway, holds a piece of that little girl I once knew. But everything began to change 10 years ago. That was the year my husband, Daniel Brooks, built the company that would later make people believe we were rich. Daniel had always been a hard-working man. He wasn't born wealthy, and neither was I. For most of our marriage, we lived a quiet middle-class life in a small neighborhood outside Denver. Daniel worked long hours managing construction projects, and I spent 35 years working as a public school librarian. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't rich either. But when Daniel turned 60, something incredible happened. A business partner approached him with an idea to develop a piece of land outside the city. At first, Daniel didn't want to risk it. He had always been careful with money. But eventually he agreed. And that single decision changed everything. Within 4 years, the land development exploded in value. New homes, shopping centers, and offices were built there. The project turned into one of the fastest-growing developments in the state. Suddenly people started using words like investor and millionaire when they talked about my husband. But the truth is something most people never understood. Daniel didn't suddenly start living like a billionaire. He still drove his old truck. He still wore the same worn-out boots. And he still insisted that money should never change the way we treated people. Linda, however, saw things very differently. At the time she was already in her early 30s, married briefly, and struggling financially after a messy divorce. She had always been impulsive with money, always chasing quick success without patience. And when she heard that her father's company was becoming successful, something shifted inside her. At first it started small. She would ask Daniel for loans. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Daniel helped her every time, because he was her father. But the requests kept getting bigger. $20,000, $50,000. Then one day, she asked for $200,000 to invest in a business idea with a man she had only known for 3 months. Daniel said no. It was the first time he had ever refused her. I still remember the look on her face that day. Shock, then anger, then something darker I couldn't quite recognize. "You care more about money than your own daughter," she told him coldly before slamming the door behind her. After that, our relationship with Linda slowly began to break apart. Months would pass without hearing from her. When she did visit, the conversations always circled back to money. "How much is the company worth now? Did you sell any property? How much do you have in savings?" Daniel tried to ignore it. He kept telling me, "She'll come around eventually." But she never did. Instead, her life started filling with the wrong kinds of people. Men who promised fast success. Men who talked about easy money. Men exactly like the one who stood in my doorway that morning laughing while she humiliated me. That man, Kyle, had only been dating Linda for 6 months. But even in that short time, I could already see what kind of influence he had on her. Every time he visited our home, he looked around with the eyes of someone measuring value. The furniture, the paintings, the house itself, like he was calculating what everything might be worth. And now, standing there beside my daughter, he was doing exactly the same thing. Studying the room, watching me, waiting for me to break. But what Linda and Kyle didn't understand was that they were both chasing something that didn't exist the way they imagined. Yes, Daniel had made good investments. Yes, we owned valuable property. But money doesn't magically turn into piles of cash waiting to be handed out. And more importantly, Daniel had left behind something far more important than money when he passed away last year. Something that Linda had never bothered to read carefully. Something that changed everything. Because the book Linda threw at my face that morning was not just any book. Inside that book, hidden between the pages, was the document that would eventually send both Linda and Kyle straight into a police interrogation room. And the moment I realized that, I stopped crying. because for the first time that morning, I understood that my daughter had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But what Linda didn't know yet was that I had already made a phone call the night before she arrived. A phone call to someone she had completely forgotten about. Someone who still loved me. Someone who also happened to work very closely with the police. And when that person stepped through my front door later that afternoon, Linda's laughter stopped immediately, because the moment she saw who it was, her face turned completely white. And that was when the real story finally began. Linda's laughter stopped the moment the front door opened. It wasn't a loud dramatic entrance. There was no shouting, just the quiet sound of the front door unlocking, and the soft creak of the hinges as someone stepped inside. For a moment, nobody in the room spoke. I was still sitting in my armchair, holding the handkerchief that had soaked up my tears. Linda stood a few feet away from me, her arms crossed, her face twisted with anger. And Kyle leaned lazily against the doorway like he owned the house. But when they both turned toward the hallway and saw who had just walked in, the entire mood in the room changed. "Hello, Mom." The voice was calm, familiar, strong. Linda's face froze. Her mouth opened slightly like she had forgotten how to breathe. "Emily," she whispered. "Yes, Emily. My younger daughter." The daughter Linda hadn't spoken to in almost 4 years. Emily stepped fully into the living room, her dark coat still dusted with cold air from outside. She carried herself with the same quiet confidence she'd had since she was young. But there was something else about her now. Something different. A small silver badge clipped to her belt caught the light for a brief second. Kyle noticed it first. His relaxed smile disappeared instantly. "Oh hell," he muttered under his breath. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone filled the room. "Nice to see you again, Linda," she said calmly. Linda blinked several times like she was trying to wake up from a dream. What are you doing here?" she asked. Emily walked further into the room, her eyes moving slowly from Linda to Kyle, and then to me. The moment she saw my red eyes and the bruise beginning to form on my cheek where the book had struck me, something dangerous flashed across her face. "Mom," she said softly. "Did they hurt you?" Before I could answer, Linda suddenly exploded. "Oh please," she snapped. "Don't start acting like some hero. This is family business. It has nothing to do with you." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Really?" she said quietly. Her eyes moved toward the book lying on the floor, then to the broken glasses beside it, then back to Linda. "You throwing objects at a 72-year-old woman?" Emily asked calmly. "Yeah, that definitely sounds like family business." Kyle straightened up from the wall, trying to regain his confidence. "Hey, relax," he said with a smirk. "Nobody got hurt. Your mom's just being dramatic." Emily slowly turned toward him, and the look she gave him made the smirk disappear instantly. "You must be Kyle," she said. Kyle shifted his weight. "Yet so?" Emily's voice stayed calm. "Good. That saves me time." Linda's anger was now boiling over. "You have no right to be here," she shouted. "Mom called you just to gang up on me, didn't she?" I finally spoke. "No, Linda," I said quietly. She turned toward me, eyes blazing. "You brought her here," she accused. I shook my head slowly. "No. Iraplia. I called her." Emily nodded once. "Yes," she said calmly. "Mom called me last night." Kyle crossed his arms. "And what? You drove all the way here because your mom was crying on the phone?" Emily looked directly at him. "No," she said. "I came because she told me something very interesting." Linda's voice became sharp. "What are you talking about?" Emily walked over and picked up the heavy book from the floor. The same book Linda had thrown at my face. She held it in her hands carefully, like it was something valuable. Kyle frowned. "It's just a book." Emily slowly opened it. Several folded documents slid slightly from between the pages. The room went silent. Linda's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" she asked. Emily looked directly at her sister. "You didn't read it, did you?" she asked. Linda scoffed. "It's just Dad's stupid investment records." Emily gave a small, almost sad smile. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." Kyle shifted again. "What are you talking about?" Emily carefully removed the documents and placed them on the coffee table. Then she said something that made the air in the room turn ice cold. This, she explained calmly, is Dad's legal trust agreement. Linda laughed loudly. Oh my God, she said. That's what this is about. Mom's money. Emily looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she said 5 words that completely wiped the smile off Linda's face. There is no money for you. The room fell silent. Linda stared at her like she had just spoken another language. What? She whispered. Emily tapped the document gently. Dad didn't leave his estate directly to Mom, she explained. Kyle's eyes narrowed. So where did it go? Emily looked straight at him. Into a protected family trust. Linda's breathing became faster. That's ridiculous, she said. Emily shook her head slowly. No, she replied. What's ridiculous is that you walked into this house today threatening Mom for money you legally can't touch. Kyle suddenly looked nervous. Wait, what does that mean? Emily's voice became even calmer. It means, she said, that the trust has conditions. Linda whispered slowly. What conditions? Emily met her eyes. The biggest one, she said quietly, is that any family member who tries to threaten, manipulate, or intimidate Mom for financial gain is permanently removed from the trust. Linda's face drained of color. Kyle cursed under his breath. And Emily slowly added one final sentence. Also, she said calmly, everything that happened in this room today. She tapped the small camera sitting quietly on the bookshelf behind Linda. Was just recorded. Linda turned around slowly. Her entire body went stiff. Because for the first time since she walked into my house that morning, she realized something terrible. She hadn't come here to take money. She had just walked straight into a trap. And the worst part? This trap was only the beginning of what I had planned. For a few seconds after Emily mentioned the camera, nobody moved. It was as if the entire room had frozen in place. Linda stood with her back to the bookshelf, staring at the small black camera like it had suddenly turned into a snake. Her face slowly lost all color. Kyle looked between the camera and the documents on the table, his confidence melting away piece by piece. You're bluffing, Linda finally said, but her voice didn't sound nearly as strong as before. Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked calmly to the bookshelf, reached up, and picked up the small device. Then she pressed a single button. A tiny red light blinked on the front. Recording active, a soft electronic voice said. The silence that followed felt heavy. Kyle ran a hand through his hair. Okay, hold on, he said nervously. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Linda turned toward him sharply. What are you talking about? She snapped. Kyle lowered his voice. I'm saying we should calm down. Emily folded her arms and leaned slightly against the table. That would be a good idea, she said. Linda's eyes moved back and forth between the three of us, like an animal looking for an escape route. You set me up, she said slowly. No, I replied quietly from my chair. You set yourself up. She turned toward me so quickly her hair swung across her face. You called her, she shouted. Yes, I said. Because I was afraid. Those words surprised her. For a moment, something almost human flashed across her expression. Afraid, she repeated. I nodded slowly. Last week you called me 6 times, I said calmly. You didn't ask how I was doing. You didn't ask if I needed anything. You only asked about the money your father left behind. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Linda crossed her arms again. So what? She said defensively. I'm his daughter. I deserve part of it. Emily spoke before I could answer. That's not how a trust works. Linda snapped back at her. You don't get to lecture me. Emily didn't raise her voice. No, she said calmly. But the law does. She tapped the documents again. Dad created this trust 3 years before he died. Linda stared at the papers like they had personally betrayed her. Why didn't anyone tell me? She demanded. Emily shrugged slightly. You never asked. Linda laughed bitterly. Oh please. You think this changes anything? Mom still controls everything. I shook my head. No, I said softly. That's another thing you misunderstood. Now both Linda and Kyle looked confused. Emily explained. Mom doesn't control the trust, she said. The trustees do. Kyle frowned. Who are the trustees? Emily smiled slightly. A law firm in Denver, and one additional person. Linda's voice came out tight. Who? Emily looked straight at her. Me. Kyle cursed quietly. Linda stared at her sister like she had just discovered a stranger wearing Emily's face. You're joking, she whispered. Emily shook her head. No. The room went silent again. Linda's breathing became heavier. You think you can just cut me out of my father's money? She said slowly. Emily answered carefully. No. You did that yourself. Linda slammed her hand on the table. This is insane. Kyle suddenly stepped forward. Listen, he said quickly, trying to sound reasonable again. Maybe we all just got off on the wrong foot today. Emily raised an eyebrow. Oh, Kyle nodded quickly. Yeah. People say things in the heat of the moment. He gestured toward me. No one meant to upset your mom. Emily stared at him for a moment. Then she asked one quiet question. Do you want me to play the recording? Kyle's mouth closed instantly. Linda's anger was now boiling again. You can't do anything with that, she snapped. It's just a family argument. Emily's eyes hardened slightly. Actually, she said calmly, threats for financial gain are taken very seriously. Kyle looked uneasy. What kind of threats? He asked. Emily turned the camera toward them. Let's review, she said. Then she pressed another button. Linda's own voice filled the room. If you don't transfer $2 million to my account today, I swear I'll make your life miserable. The recording continued. Kyle's voice followed. Sometimes you have to pressure people like her. The room fell silent again. Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear. Linda's face turned red with rage. You can't use that, she shouted. Emily's voice remained calm. Oh, we can. Then she added something that made Kyle's entire posture collapse. Especially because this isn't the first time you two have tried something like this. Kyle froze. Linda blinked. What does that mean? She asked. Emily reached into her coat pocket. Then she placed another small folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots, text messages, bank transfers, voice recordings, evidence. Linda stared at them with wide eyes. Where did you get those? She whispered. Emily answered quietly. From the police. Kyle's face went completely pale. Because in that moment, he realized something that Linda still hadn't fully understood. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This had already become a criminal investigation. And when the doorbell rang a few seconds later, everything got even worse. Because standing outside my front door were two police officers. The doorbell rang again. Not a soft, polite ring. A firm one. The kind that makes everyone in the house stop breathing for a moment. Linda's eyes snapped toward the front door. Kyle looked like someone had just drained all the blood from his body. Emily didn't move. She simply glanced at me. Mom, she said quietly. Do you want me to get that? For a moment, I just sat there in my chair, my hands folded in my lap. My heart was beating faster than it had in years. Not from fear, but from the strange feeling that after months of tension, something was finally reaching its breaking point. Yes, I said softly. Go ahead. Emily nodded once and walked calmly toward the door. Linda suddenly stepped forward. Wait, she said sharply. Emily stopped. Linda's voice was tight with panic now. You called the police? Emily turned back slowly. No, she said. I didn't. Linda looked confused. Then why are they here? Emily didn't answer. Instead, she opened the door. Two uniformed police officers stood on the front porch. Both of them were calm, professional, and clearly aware of where they were. Good afternoon, the older officer said politely. Officer Martinez, Denver Police Department. Emily nodded and stepped aside. Comain. The officers walked into the house. The moment they entered the living room, their eyes quickly took in the situation. Me sitting in the armchair. The camera on the table. The documents. Linda and Kyle standing stiffly near the coffee table like two students caught cheating during an exam. Officer Martinez gave a small nod toward me. Ma'am, he said kindly. Are you Mrs. Eleanor Brooks? Yes, I replied quietly. He glanced at the bruise forming on my cheek. Did someone throw an object at you today? Linda immediately stepped forward. Oh my God, she said loudly. This is ridiculous. It was an accident. Kyle nodded quickly. Yeah, we were just arguing. It's a family thing. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. Emily spoke calmly. I have the entire incident recorded. The officers looked toward the camera. Officer Martinez nodded slowly. Good, he said. Then he turned his attention toward Linda and Kyle. Would either of you like to explain what happened here? Linda forced out a nervous laugh. This is completely blown out of proportion, she said. We're just talking about family finances. Kyle added quickly, yeah, nothing illegal. Emily quietly pressed a button on the camera. Linda's voice immediately filled the room again. If you don't transfer $2 million to my account today, I swear I'll make your life miserable. Then Kyle's voice followed. Sometimes you have to pressure people like her. The recording ended. The silence afterward was heavy. Officer Martinez looked slowly from Linda to Kyle, then back to Emily. How long have you had this recording? He asked. Since the moment they walked into the house, Emily replied. Kyle suddenly raised his hands defensively. Look, officer, that's not what it sounds like. Officer Martinez's voice remained calm. It sounds exactly like a threat for financial gain. Linda's face flushed bright red. She's twisting everything, she shouted, pointing at Emily. This is my mother. I was asking for money that belongs to me. Emily spoke again. Actually, she said calmly, the trust agreement specifically forbids any family member from attempting financial coercion. Officer Martinez nodded slightly. Yes, we're aware of the trust, he said. Linda's head snapped toward him. What? Kyle looked just as shocked. What do you mean you're aware? He asked. The younger officer finally spoke. Because this isn't the first report connected to you two. Kyle's face went completely still. Linda blinked. What report? She demanded. Emily quietly opened the second folder again. The same one she had placed on the table earlier. Inside were printed screenshots, bank records, text messages, voice recordings. Officer Martinez picked up the top sheet. These messages, he said calmly, show discussions about pressuring Mrs. Brooks for money weeks before today. Linda's breathing became sharp. That doesn't prove anything. Kyle suddenly looked furious. You told them, he whispered harshly toward Linda. She turned on him immediately. Don't start blaming me. Officer Martinez raised a hand. All right, he said calmly. Let's all take a step back. Then he looked directly at Kyle. Sir, could you tell me what you meant when you said, sometimes you have to pressure people like her? Kyle hesitated. His mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Linda tried again. This is insane, she said. We're her children. Officer Martinez looked at me. Ma'am, he asked gently, do you feel threatened by either of these individuals? The room went completely silent. Linda's eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who once held my hand. But that girl was gone. What stood in front of me now was someone I barely recognized. I took a slow breath. Then I answered. Yes. Linda gasped. Mom. But I didn't look away. I do feel threatened, I said quietly. Officer Martinez nodded once. All right. Then he turned toward Linda and Kyle. Both of you are going to need to come with us, so we can ask a few more questions downtown. Kyle stepped backward immediately. Wait a minute, he said. You're arresting us? The younger officer shook his head. Not yet. Linda looked confused. What do you mean not yet? Officer Martinez placed the printed messages back on the table. It means, he said calmly, we still need to review all the evidence. Then he looked directly at Kyle. And trust me. He paused slightly. There's a lot more evidence than what we've seen today. Kyle's face turned pale again. Because in that moment, he realized something Linda still didn't understand. This situation was already much bigger than a single argument in a living room. And the person who had been quietly building this case for months hadn't even revealed the most damaging evidence yet. Because the biggest piece of proof against them was still hidden somewhere inside this house. When Officer Martinez said there was more evidence, Kyle's confidence finally shattered. I could see it clearly in his eyes. Just 20 minutes earlier, he had been leaning against my doorway laughing while my daughter humiliated me. Now his shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, and sweat had started forming along his hairline. Linda, however, was still clinging to anger. "You can't do this," she said loudly, pacing back and forth in the living room like a trapped animal. "This is insane. This is my mother's house." Officer Martinez remained calm. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Which is exactly why we're here." Emily stood quietly near the table, watching everything carefully. I could tell she was giving Linda every opportunity to calm down. But my older daughter had never been good at walking away from conflict. Instead, she turned toward me again. "Mom," she said sharply, "tell them this is a misunderstanding." Her voice almost sounded desperate now. "You know I would never hurt you." For a moment my heart ached. Not because I believed her, but because I remembered the little girl she once was. The girl who used to bring me wildflowers she picked from the yard. The girl who once cried for an hour when she accidentally stepped on a butterfly. But that girl had slowly disappeared over the years, replaced by someone driven by anger and greed. I looked at her calmly. "You already hurt me," I said softly. Linda froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. Then Kyle suddenly spoke. "Look," he said, forcing a shaky smile. "Everyone's getting emotional here. Let's just talk like adults." Officer Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You had that chance earlier." Kyle rubbed his hands together nervously. "I'm just saying. We don't need police reports over family arguments." Emily finally spoke again. That stopped being true when threats were made. Kyle sighed heavily. "Okay, fine," he muttered. Then he turned toward me. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, softening his tone. "I'm sure we got off on the wrong foot. If Linda upset you, we apologize." Linda shot him an angry look. But Kyle ignored her. "We just thought since you have all this money, maybe you could help her out." I watched him carefully. Even now, he was still trying to manipulate the situation. Still trying to turn my kindness into weakness. And that was when I realized something very important. Kyle didn't understand who he was dealing with. Most people saw an elderly woman sitting quietly in a chair and assumed she was fragile. But I had spent 35 years working in a public school library. 35 years watching children grow into adults. 35 years learning how people behave when they want something. I had seen every kind of manipulation there was. And that was exactly why I had prepared for this moment long before today. "Officer Martinez," I said gently. "Yes, ma'am. There's something in the study you should probably see." Emily immediately understood. She nodded and walked down the hallway toward my late husband's old office. Linda frowned. "What are you doing now?" he asked suspiciously. Kyle shifted again. "This is getting ridiculous," he muttered. But a few moments later, Emily returned carrying a small metal lockbox. She placed it carefully on the coffee table. Kyle stared at it. "What's that?" he asked. Emily looked at him calmly. "More evidence." Linda scoffed. "Oh, please." Emily opened the box. Inside were several USB drives, a stack of printed documents, and a small digital recorder. Kyle's face went pale, because he recognized one of the items immediately. The recorder. He whispered something under his breath. Linda noticed. "What?" she asked. Kyle didn't answer. Emily picked up the recorder. "About 3 weeks ago," she said calmly, "Mom told me something interesting." Linda rolled her eyes. "Here we go again." Emily ignored her. "She told me Linda had been calling repeatedly asking about the trust." Linda crossed her arms. "So?" Emily pressed a button on the recorder. Kyle's voice suddenly filled the room. "This old woman is sitting on millions, Linda. If she won't give it willingly, we'll just scare her into it." The room went silent. Linda's head snapped toward Kyle. "You said that," she whispered. Kyle looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. "Linda, wait." But the recording continued. Linda's own voice followed. "I don't care what it takes. She owes me that money." The audio stopped. Officer Martinez slowly looked up. "Well," he said quietly, "that changes things." Linda's face had gone completely white. She stared at Kyle like she had never seen him before. You recorded us? She asked in disbelief. I shook my head gently. No, I said. You recorded yourselves. Kyle whispered a curse. Emily closed the recorder and placed it back in the box. Officer Martinez sighed slightly. All right, he said. Then he turned toward Linda and Kyle. At this point, we're no longer just discussing threats. Kyle swallowed hard. What do you mean? Linda's face had gone completely white. She stared at Kyle like she had never seen him before. You recorded us? She asked in disbelief. I shook my head gently. No, I said. You recorded yourselves. Kyle whispered a curse. Emily closed the recorder and placed it back in the box. Officer Martinez sighed slightly. All right, he said. Then he turned toward Linda and Kyle. At this point, we're no longer just discussing threats. Kyle swallowed hard. What do you mean? Officer Martinez's voice was calm but firm. It means we now have evidence suggesting a plan to intimidate someone for financial gain. The younger officer stepped forward, which can fall under attempted extortion. Kyle looked like he might faint. Linda started shaking her head rapidly. No, this is crazy. But Officer Martinez had already taken out his radio. And as he spoke quietly into it, calling something in, I realized something. The moment Linda walked into my house that morning, she believed she was coming to take something from me. What she didn't know was that she was actually walking straight into the consequences of her own choices. And in just a few minutes, those consequences were going to become very real. Because the next words Officer Martinez said changed everything. When Officer Martinez finished speaking into his radio, the room fell into a heavy silence. Linda stood in the middle of my living room like the ground beneath her feet had suddenly disappeared. Kyle looked worse. His hands were shaking now. The confidence he had walked into my house with earlier that morning was completely gone. What did you just say on that radio? He asked nervously. Officer Martinez clipped the radio back onto his belt. I asked the station to prepare a formal report, he replied calmly. Kyle swallowed hard. For what? The officer didn't hesitate. For suspected attempted extortion. Linda's head snapped up. Extortion, she shouted. Her voice echoed off the walls of the house she had grown up in. This is insane, she continued. She's my mother. Officer Martinez nodded slightly. Yes, he said. And that's exactly why this situation is so serious. Linda ran both hands through her hair, pacing across the room again. No, this isn't happening, she muttered. Kyle suddenly stepped forward again, desperation creeping into his voice. Look, officer. People say things they don't mean all the time, he said. Emily folded her arms calmly. Threatening someone for money isn't just saying things. Kyle turned toward her sharply. You're loving this, aren't you? Emily didn't react. No, she said quietly. I'm protecting my mother. Linda let out a bitter laugh. Oh please, she snapped. You always thought you were better than me. Emily looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she said something simple. No, Linda. I just made different choices. That sentence seemed to hit harder than anything else. Linda's anger started cracking. For the first time that day, I saw fear in her eyes. She turned toward me again. Mom, she said, her voice softer now. Tell them this is ridiculous. I looked at her quietly. You threw a book at my face, I reminded her. She shook her head quickly. It slipped. Kyle muttered under his breath. Oh, come on. Linda shot him an angry glare. Shut up, Kyle. The younger police officer spoke again. Ma'am, the recording shows the object was thrown during a threat. Linda threw her hands in the air. This is unbelievable. Then she turned toward Kyle again. You said this would work, she snapped. Kyle's eyes widened. I never said threaten her. Linda laughed harshly. You literally told me to pressure her. Kyle shook his head. That's not what I meant. Officer Martinez watched them carefully. Interesting, he said quietly. Linda suddenly realized what she had just done. She had just confirmed the recording. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh my God. Kyle stared at her in disbelief. Did you seriously just say that out loud? Emily sighed softly. People tend to tell the truth when they panic. The tension in the room grew thicker. Linda slowly backed away from the table. I need to leave, she said suddenly. She grabbed her purse from the couch. I'm done with this nonsense. But before she could take 2 steps toward the front door, Officer Martinez spoke again. Ma'am, I'm afraid that won't be possible. Linda froze. What do you mean? The officer's voice remained calm but firm. For now, you and Mr. Kyle will need to remain here while we finish documenting the situation. Kyle's shoulders slumped. This is a nightmare, he whispered. Linda turned toward him angrily. This is your fault. My fault, he snapped back. You're the one who lost control. Oh please, she said bitterly. You pushed me into this. Officer Martinez raised a hand. All right. That's enough. The room went quiet again. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Brooks, he said gently. Yes. Would you like to press charges regarding the threat and physical incident? Linda stared at me. Her entire future seemed to hang on my answer. For a moment I didn't speak. My mind filled with memories. Birthday parties. School concerts. Family dinners. All the years I had loved and protected my daughter. But love doesn't mean allowing someone to destroy you. And sometimes, the hardest decision a parent can make is choosing not to protect their child from the consequences of their own actions. I took a slow breath. Then I answered. Yes. Linda gasped. Mom. But Officer Martinez had already begun writing something down. Understood, he said. Kyle ran both hands over his face. This can't be happening. But it was. And the worst part for them was that they still didn't understand the full situation. Because the trust document on the table, the one Linda had ignored, contained one final condition she hadn't heard yet. A condition that meant even if she somehow avoided criminal charges, she would still lose something far more valuable, her inheritance. And when Emily finally read that final clause out loud, Linda realized something terrifying. She hadn't just ruined one afternoon. She had just destroyed her entire future. When Officer Martinez asked if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes, something inside Linda finally broke. She stared at me like she had never seen me before. Mom, she whispered again, her voice shaking now. But I didn't look away. For years I had allowed Linda to push boundaries. I had forgiven the angry phone calls. I had ignored the insults. I had even excused the way she disappeared for months at a time unless she needed something. But the moment she stood in my living room and demanded money while threatening me, something inside me finally changed. I was still her mother, but I was no longer her victim. Linda slowly turned toward Emily again. You're really doing this? She asked. Emily's voice remained calm. No, Linda, she said. You did this. Kyle looked like he was about to collapse into the couch behind him. This is insane, he muttered. But Officer Martinez was already writing notes into his report. The younger officer began photographing the room. The book on the floor, the broken glasses, the documents on the coffee table. Every piece of evidence. Every mistake Linda and Kyle had made. Linda suddenly noticed the trust document again. Her eyes locked onto it. Wait, she said quickly. She stepped toward the table and grabbed the papers. You said there were conditions in this trust, she said. Emily nodded. Yes. Linda began flipping through the pages quickly, frustration growing with every second. This is all legal nonsense, she snapped. Where does it say I lose anything? Emily leaned forward slightly and pointed to the final page. Right there. Linda's eyes scanned the paragraph. At first her expression looked confused. Then slowly it changed. Her lips parted. Her hands began trembling. No, she whispered. Kyle leaned closer. What does it say? Linda didn't answer. Emily read the clause out loud. Her voice was steady. Any beneficiary who attempts to intimidate, threaten, or manipulate the primary guardian of the trust for financial gain will be immediately and permanently removed from all inheritance rights within the Brooks family trust. The words seemed to hang in the air like thunder after a lightning strike. Kyle blinked. Wait, what? Emily continued calmly. That means if someone tries to pressure Mom for money, they automatically lose their inheritance. Kyle slowly turned toward Linda. You didn't read this? He asked. Linda looked like she might faint. No, she whispered. Emily added quietly. And because everything today was recorded, the trustees now have clear evidence. Kyle's voice rose in panic. Hold on, he said. You're saying she just lost her inheritance? Emily nodded. Yes. Linda shook her head rapidly. No, this isn't real, she said. She turned toward me again. Mom, tell her this isn't real. But I simply sat there in my chair. The truth was, I had begged my husband years ago not to include such a harsh clause. I believed families should forgive each other. But Daniel had always been more realistic than I was. I still remembered what he told me the day he signed the trust documents. Money reveals people's true character, he said. And if someone ever tries to hurt you for it, they don't deserve a single dollar. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. But now, sitting in my living room watching my daughter panic over money she believed belonged to her, I realized Daniel had seen something I didn't want to accept. Kyle suddenly exploded. This is unbelievable, he shouted. He pointed at Linda. You told me your parents were leaving you millions. Linda turned on him instantly. How is this my fault? You're the one who dragged me into this. Kyle laughed bitterly. Oh really? You were the one screaming at your mom 5 minutes ago. Officer Martinez cleared his throat. Both of you might want to calm down. But they were too busy blaming each other now. Years of bad decisions were suddenly collapsing all at once, and neither of them knew where to direct the anger. Finally, Linda looked back at Emily. You're lying, she said. Emily raised an eyebrow. You're welcome to ask the law firm managing the trust. Linda's face twisted with desperation. They wouldn't do this to me. Emily's voice softened slightly. They already did. The room went quiet again. Linda slowly sank down onto the couch. Her entire body looked drained. For the first time that day, she wasn't angry. She was terrified. Kyle looked at her like he was seeing her differently now. Not as a partner, but as someone who had just destroyed his access to easy money. And in that moment, I realized something else. Kyle hadn't come into my daughter's life because he loved her. He had come because he believed she would inherit wealth. Now that belief was gone. And the look on his face told me something important. He was already thinking about walking away. But before he could say anything, Officer Martinez's radio crackled again. A voice came through. And the message it delivered made the entire situation even worse for Linda and Kyle. Because the police station had just finished reviewing something that connected them to another case entirely. When Officer Martinez's radio crackled, everyone in the room froze again. Even Linda stopped breathing for a moment. The officer lifted the radio slowly to his mouth. Martinez here, he said. A voice answered from the other side, slightly distorted through the speaker. Dispatch confirming information you requested. The names match. The room felt suddenly colder. Officer Martinez glanced briefly at the younger officer beside him. Understood, he replied. Then he clipped the radio back onto his belt. Kyle swallowed nervously. What was that about? He asked. Officer Martinez didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up the folder Emily had placed on the coffee table earlier and flipped through a few of the pages. Linda looked between them anxiously. You can't just stand there like that, she said. What's going on? The officer finally looked up. It appears, he said carefully, that this situation may be connected to another complaint filed 2 months ago. Kyle's face went stiff. Linda blinked. What complaint? She asked. Emily leaned slightly against the table, watching quietly. Officer Martinez continued. A 78-year-old man named Richard Langford filed a report claiming someone attempted to pressure him into signing financial documents. Kyle suddenly spoke too quickly. I've never heard of that guy. The officer raised an eyebrow. Interesting, he said. Because Mr. Langford described the person who visited him. Kyle looked away. Linda turned toward him slowly. What is he talking about? She asked. Kyle forced a laugh. Nothing. This is ridiculous. But Officer Martinez slid one of the printed photos from the folder across the table. It was a still image from a security camera. Kyle stared at it. His face turned pale. Linda grabbed the photo. Her eyes widened. Kyle, she whispered. The picture clearly showed him standing on the front porch of an elderly man's house. Kyle shook his head quickly. That doesn't mean anything. The officer nodded. You're right. Then he placed another page on the table. This one might. It was a transcript of a recorded phone call. Kyle's voice was printed clearly across the page. Linda began reading it. Her lips moved silently at first. Then suddenly she stopped. Her hands started shaking. You told him the same thing, she said quietly. Kyle rubbed his face in frustration. It wasn't like that. Linda looked up at him with disbelief. You said if he didn't transfer money to you, you'd expose some fake tax problem. Kyle's voice rose defensively. I was just bluffing. Officer Martinez spoke calmly. Threatening someone with false accusations for financial gain is also considered extortion. The word hung heavily in the air. Kyle looked like he might collapse. This is insane, he whispered. Emily spoke quietly. That man reported the incident. Linda slowly turned toward Kyle. You told me you worked in investments, she said. Kyle didn't answer. You said you helped older people manage their money. Still nothing. Her voice broke. You were scamming them? Kyle snapped. I was surviving. Linda stared at him in shock. You dragged me into this, she said. Kyle laughed bitterly. Oh please, Linda. You were perfectly happy when you thought you'd get millions from your mom. The room fell silent again. For the first time that day, Linda had no argument. Because deep down, she knew he was right. Officer Martinez closed the folder. At this point, he said calmly, Mr. Kyle, we need you to come with us. Kyle's eyes widened. What? The younger officer stepped forward. You're being detained for questioning regarding the Langford complaint and the events that occurred here today. Kyle looked around the room desperately. This is unbelievable. Then he pointed at Linda. She's the one who threatened her mom. Linda gasped. You told me to. Officer Martinez sighed. All right. He turned toward Linda. Ma'am, you'll also need to come with us so we can take your statement. Linda looked like the world had just collapsed around her. Her boyfriend was being detained. Her inheritance was gone. And now the police were involved in more than one case. She slowly turned toward me one last time. Mom, she whispered. But there was nothing left for me to say. Some choices can't be undone. The officers guided Kyle toward the front door first. Linda followed slowly behind them. Just before stepping outside, she looked back at the house she grew up in. The house she had once called home. And in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. This wasn't just the end of an argument. It was the end of the relationship I once had with my daughter. But the story wasn't over yet. Because later that evening, after the police cars had left, Emily received a phone call from the law firm managing the family trust. And the news they delivered was something even Linda had never imagined could happen. After the police cars drove away, the house felt quieter than it had in years. Not peaceful, just empty. The living room still looked like the aftermath of a storm. The book that Linda had thrown earlier lay on the coffee table beside the broken frame of my glasses. The documents from the trust were still spread across the surface, and the small recording camera sat silently beside them. Emily walked over and gently turned the camera off. Then she looked at me. Mom, are you okay? I took a slow breath. I think so, I said softly. But the truth was more complicated than that. No mother ever imagines a day when the police will take her own daughter away from her home. Even when that daughter has hurt you. Even when that daughter has betrayed your trust. A part of your heart still remembers the little girl she used to be. Emily sat down across from me. For a few minutes neither of us spoke. Then suddenly her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. It's the law firm, she said. My heart tightened slightly. Answer it. Emily stepped into the hallway to take the call. I could hear pieces of the conversation drifting back into the living room. Yes. I understand. All right. Thank you for letting us know. When she returned, her expression was serious. What did they say? I asked. Emily sat down again and placed the phone on the table. The trustees reviewed the evidence we sent them this afternoon. I nodded slowly. And she took a breath. The clause in Dad's trust has officially been activated. Even though I had expected it, hearing the word still felt heavy. That means Linda is permanently removed as a beneficiary. The sentence sat quietly in the room. Just like that, decades of inheritance were gone. Emily continued. And because she violated the trust conditions, she's also banned from entering any property owned by the Brooks Family Trust. That included this house, Linda's childhood home, the place she once ran through as a little girl. Does she know? I asked quietly. Emily shook her head. Not yet. Then she added something else. The lawyers said if she tries to challenge the trust in court, the recordings and police report will be used as evidence. In other words, there was no way back for her. The door to the life she believed she deserved had just slammed shut forever. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Your whole life can change in a single afternoon. But the truth is, moments like this are usually built from years of choices. Linda didn't lose everything today. She had been losing pieces of her life for a long time. Greed, anger, the wrong people around her. And eventually, those choices led her straight to my living room that morning, where she believed she could scare me into giving her millions of dollars. Instead, she walked away with nothing. Emily gently placed her hand on mine. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, she said. I nodded slowly. So am I. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the kind of silence that comes from fear anymore. It was the silence of a chapter finally ending. I thought about something my husband Daniel used to say. Respect is worth more than money. Linda had chased money so hard that she forgot the one thing that truly mattered. And in the end, that mistake cost her everything. But before I finish this story, I want to say something to anyone listening. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we once loved the deepest. Standing up to them isn't easy. It can break your heart. But protecting yourself isn't cruelty. It's courage. And that day in my living room, for the first time in a very long time, I finally chose courage.